September back to school edition of the Lipedema Patient Roundtable. I am Brenda Viola, representing Lympha Press tonight, proud to host this amazing panel. And look at our snazzy new graphics. You don't have to really guess who we are because it says so right in the corner. You are looking at familiar faces. There's two notes I do want to make. We are missing the beloved face of our dear Susie Boshoff tonight. And you may have noticed she was missing last month. We wanted to protect her privacy and the privacy of her family, but her mother-in-law was in hospice last month, and since we last got together, did pass away. So she is with her family tonight, comforting her husband, whose parents had been married for 55 years. What a thing. So send Susie lots of love and comforting energy tonight and for the next few weeks. Of course, she'll be in mourning and grieving such a loss. We miss her tonight. We're also happy tonight because we are welcoming a gentleman that I got to meet at the FDRS conference, and this entire panel wanted him to join us, Noah Danesh from Total Lipedema Care, because we had some questions coming in about long COVID, and Noah is so smart and has information about that as well as inflammation. Noah, we're so glad to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Well, we are delighted, and we see chat already happening all over the place. By the way, Holly Hope wants to know, Noah, were you the speaker who wanted to know whose Durcums disease pain went away with COVID? It was me. So
wow.
Holly Hope, thank you for weighing in on this.
Wow.
We see April Sluter's there, Mitzi Love. What a great name, Mitzi Love. I want that name. Wow. Hello, Lori, and everybody else. Please weigh in. We know chat is just as active as what happens here on the screen. Jenny Bogene, Lipedema and Food Sensitivities, Patty Cornude at Lipedema Fitness, Angelique Charles, the beautiful Lippy Butterfly, and Kara Cruz at Pale Ginger Pear. We've got so much to talk about. Where do we begin? But let's start with you, Noah, because we did ask you to address this long COVID question. And what can you say about it? Or what could you offer to our audience who's interested in the connection and lipedema?
Absolutely. Thank you, Brenda. And once again, thanks for everything you do to bring this panel together every month. It's fantastic. So long COVID. So maybe giving some context, at FDRS this past April, we gave a presentation about the link of COVID-19, long COVID, and Durcums disease. And in that scenario, so with Durcums, we did find many cases of people who developed COVID or developed Durcums following COVID, particularly severe cases of COVID. And there are some scenarios that it might have gone away. We have Holly, who just mentioned right here. So this is still a really exciting place of exploration because it can help us figure out treatments. So that was with Durcums. Now with COVID and lipedema. There's a lot of fascinating potential associations that we've been also looking at. We have launched a survey. Dr. Schwartz speaks a lot about it. A retrospective and prospective survey that is tracking each one of our patients that comes in, and they fill it out, and we track them following their surgery. And one of the things we have marked there is COVID. So we're tracking to see how many of our patients have COVID, what the severity was, and how long they've had it, potentially the long COVID symptoms. So that's something that's still in the works. And I hope in a future roundtable, we'll be able to share our results on that. But in speaking with Dr. Schwartz, and we also spoke with Dr. Herbst, who we know is a fantastic big piece of this whole puzzle. She, with her and Dr. Schwartz, we were looking at potential things of COVID and lipedema. And I don't want to make our answer too long. We have a lot to get to tonight. But in effect, lipedema, we know, is an inflammatory disease, significant association of mast cell and other different diseases, inflammatory diseases that play a role in lipedema. And COVID, long COVID, a lot of literature, even in the past few months, has been coming out showing the link of inflammation of long COVID to lipedema. And what we've noticed is there's a lot of similar aspects, a lot of similar symptoms that exist between them. And a lot of times when we see that, we can expect an exasperation. So if it's not a cause, it might not necessarily cause it. It might make it in some ways more challenging. So I'm sure tonight we'll be able to talk a little bit more about some data, which I have on the numbers of our research in other aspects like mast cell, which is a big part of long COVID, and lipedema. But all this to say, this foundation that I wanted to set now with this answer is that while there's still a lot we are getting to know, it is a part of exploration that we're working hard on, and that we want to make sure we understand, because that can help guide what we do for treatments.
Well, first of all, you can talk as much as you want because you are a medical expert, and we are so honored to have you on the panel. And we do want to get to that data. While you were speaking, one of the authors of the Standard of Care for Lipedema in the United States, Kathleen Lisson, popped up on the screen. And we are so delighted because she is freshly back from her visit to Genoa, Italy. Why was I not invited to that conference? I don't know, but you are probably full of inspiration, Kathleen, and ideas and new research. And what can you tell us? We're on the edge of our seats.
Yeah, I got run over with inspiration. I got pummeled by inspiration from around the world. And I think Noah, you've been to conferences as well. Yeah, like coming back from a conference is a big deal.
Absolutely.
It's 12 hours a day for 4 days of like breaking news. So the interesting thing, I think that top story, it comes from America. It's the work that Dr. Wei Chen is doing at the Cleveland Clinic, that work he's going to be doing with LVAs on the cervical lymph nodes to possibly help with Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And that's something that's being looked at in several countries. People are talking about it. And the different meningeal lymphatics and other lymphatics in the brain, and how several different ways that scientists are looking at to try to reduce the effects of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. But it's very interesting to see. It was only a few years ago when I was in anatomy and physiology class that I was arguing with my teacher. Famously, I think of this story all the time. I was arguing with my teacher of whether there was lymphatics in the brain or not, and getting test questions wrong because I'd read some recent research and I was extrapolating that there were indeed lymphatics in the brain. And it's fantastic how fast science has come, that now we're talking with surgeons, in international conferences about, and other scientists that do rat experiments talking about the different lymphatics and how we can help them with either pharmaceuticals or surgery. So that's the big thing. Another interesting thing, because you just get to see like 150 different things. There was some interesting research that the lady was using. She was pressing down on the skin of the leg of someone with lipedema, if I'm not mistaken, and pressing in different areas. And there was one real focal point where it was more pain than other pains. And when they imaged it, that's where the perforating vessel was under the skin. So there was a kind of interesting that it's definitely not in our heads, the people with lymphedema. And then there might also be like some specific part of the anatomy that we can point to that may be part of the story of why there's pain with lipedema. So I found that very interesting. And just the idea that, and the little girl inside of me, which I think everyone can commiserate with me now, like, ladies, gentlemen, I went to an international conference and they talked about lipedema. And people in different countries knew what lipedema was, and we were talking about it. And it's just amazing, because I remember being in like a room of like 20 people in like the coat closet at a conference talking about lipedema, and there was like 1 or 2 speakers. And for it now to be on even footing at a worldwide lymphology conference was amazing.
Goosebumps and
Yeah.
cheers all around from, I know, our visitors that are in the chat and everybody on the panel here. And you gave me a perfect tee up to little us, because we do have this visual here, that Patty Cornute did put together. It is our back to school episode. And I hope you are all seeing Kara Cruz. Yes, that's me. I know it's shocking. I'm not a natural blonde. Oh my goodness. Susie, our dear Susie, Angelique, Patty, Jenny, all of the little us's. And, last year we did an episode about high school and what would we say to our high school selves? But one of the questions that all of us on the panel have been considering is, let's get it even earlier. What would we say to our little selves? So, chatters, feel free to put in chat what you would say to your little selves. We're going to come back to this, and we're all going to answer this question at one point or another. But we do have some other questions about COVID too. And by the way, pipe in, Kathleen, listen, we're so honored that you are with us with all you have going on, international travel, best-selling author, and here you are with us. So we're extremely honored. There is a question from the audience. Someone wants to know, is there a point of view on taking the latest COVID vaccine, given the connection between long COVID and Durcums? Is there any point of view on that we could share during this forum? And I'll throw it out to you, Noah or Kathleen.
Kathleen, I don't know if you had a comment. One thing that we were speaking on about the vaccine. So this is actually a very important and part of the nuanced aspect of this. With the vaccine, we want to prevent people from getting COVID because that aspect of it and the long-term long COVID is a problem. And the vaccine reduces the risk of long COVID. So there's that aspect. However, there's also the issue in a smaller number, but that some people with the vaccine, we found that from their anecdotal sense, that after the vaccine, they felt that their Durcums or their lipedema became a little bit more painful. So both sides of this were kind of brought up. Even after actually the presentation in FDRS, a few people came to me, and then I heard both sides. Someone said that, I had the vaccine and then afterwards it was bad. But others who said they had COVID, unfortunately, they didn't have any worse thing. So that's a big answer to say, unfortunately, there's still a lot that we don't know about that. But in the consideration, I think it's important to understand that with the links that we're starting to see with long COVID and with the long COVID and with Durcums and potentially lipedema, to consider that in the factor. And I think even more importantly than that, I think it's important, if you can, to speak with your physician who has a very nuanced understanding of your case. And unfortunately, there aren't a lot of people who, I'm glad that Kathleen was mentioning the fact that lipedema is becoming more common. More people understand the knowledge of it becoming more common. So that's going to help a lot. But if you can, and speak with your physician who understands your ideal path forward, that's probably the best way to go about it.
Good answer. Thank you so much for that. And jump on in, Kathleen.
Noah, did they say how long the symptoms lasted?
That's a good question. So with the long COVID, people who had the problems, their symptoms was ranging from, we had some that were 3 months is when it started becoming bad. Some who had been going for more than a year. They had it at the end of 2020 up until 2022. They were still experiencing some of their long COVID symptoms, which were getting better. But it was exacerbating their Durcums in that scenario. So there's been the range that I've seen from a few months to years.
But after the vaccine, how long did the Durcums symptoms exacerbate?
So this was just one case that I had that was long term. Some people who had the vaccine, they said that it was for a short period, their pain was worse than over time. Whether they had tried a few different treatments, so whether it was the treatments that helped them with that, or whether it was just itself getting better, that's part of the research. That there's so much research to do. That's part of the question. But for some people, the symptoms went away even without any other activity, meaning after a couple months, is from those anecdotal experiences.
So go ahead, Angelique, we'd love to hear from you.
I have a question. And I don't know if I'm phrasing this right because I don't know enough about COVID in order to phrase it correctly. So bear with me a little bit here. Somebody who didn't have specifically COVID, but perhaps maybe had asymptomatic COVID that they have never gotten tested. If they're experiencing fluctuations with their lipedema now that is kind of unexplained, should they get tested for the antibodies for COVID prior? Does that make sense?
I think,
Like, I'm wondering if I'm experiencing long-term effects from something that I didn't know that I had.
So that's a great question. So my thing about testing with labs, so I guess when you talk to different people, they'll say different things. Based on this research perspective, I always like to have people who have their labs done for panels, for example, with inflammatory markers like CRP, or with whether they have the COVID antibodies. And I say that maybe just as a quick tangent, is that a lot of the patients who have come to total lipedema care, and they come in, they bring in their own labs. I'm sure you all know there's a lot of different aspects of lipedema and it presents in different ways. But I always appreciate when everyone brings their labs and you can see trends among them, one of which being CRP. So CRP is C-reactive protein, an inflammatory marker. And in some patients, we see that since they've been teenagers, which is also when their lipedema came, they've had high levels of CRP. And unfortunately, some of them after surgery, their CRP immediately goes down. So this is actually a paper we're working on, hopefully being able to share that soon too, is that CRP being an inflammatory marker can potentially be associated with COVID too, and with lipedema. So I say all that to say, I think it's good if you get your labs. It might help with dictating kind of what direction you want to go with things. But I would do that in coordination with a physician who will be able to order the right ones and the ones that would provide the biggest context picture in what you need.
Great question. Anybody else from the panel have questions on this topic? We are getting lots of chatter from our chatters regarding the question, what would you say to your little selves? And what I'm seeing over and over again is talking more kindly to ourselves. And that's the theme of an initiative you're involved with this coming month and the coming weeks, right, Patty? And our friend April Sluter.
Yeah, we've got a collaboration going between Lipedema Fitness and the Lipedema Journey, where we're doing a specific Peloton ride with Christine. And she does a lot of self-talk workshops outside of Peloton. She's very inspirational about that. And so the ride is a very healing ride, and it's broken down into 4 separate rides: the I am ride, I can, I do, I will, and I do. And then after each ride, we're going a little deeper with April, and she's helping us through journal entries and working with how we can do that. And it was interesting. We did the first ride on Monday, and what kind of struck me was when she was talking about, you say I am, and then you say the first things that kind of come to your mind. And a lot of times they may be negative things. And then you have to kind of edit out the negative, take out the not. I'm not good enough. I'm not whatever. And for my brain went to untying knots and letting go of things within ourselves that no longer serve us. And how important that is to recognize and give yourself grace while you're going through the work, because it's going to be work to go through that stuff.
Untying the knots. I often do an analogy, because back when I used to have a swimming pool, now I hardly even have a backyard, but I had to use the power washer to get rid of the dirt and the bugs and the debris. And it was an awesome feeling, to just go and just get rid of it all. Don't you wish we could just power wash our lives sometimes, or our minds? But one time I was doing my job and it just stopped. And I just had to look around, and my hose was twisted. Not my pantyhose. My hose was twisted, and I had to go back and untwist that hose. And then all of a sudden the flow started again. And I think that that's such a great way to put it, Patty, because sometimes we just get knotted up. And if we just can go back to where we got knotted and say, no, I'm not going to agree with that. I'm going to untwist that. Your flow can begin again. I love this initiative, this collaboration. How can people find and follow and get involved with it, Patty?
Well, they can go to Lipedema Fitness on Instagram. Is probably the easiest place. I post the rides every week that we're going to be doing. And then the lipedema journey is also on Instagram. And April is amazing at the emotional and the journaling aspect of that.
Yeah, this is great. And earlier today, Jenny, you sent a video around that truly touched our hearts. We do a lot of pre-show chatter just because we want this to be an impactful hour for all of you. What was the message in that video, Jenny? It really goes along with all of this.
Well, I particularly like, and I have to thank there's a woman out there on Facebook, and she has lipedema and has had surgery along the way. Andrea Manham, I think is her name. Yeah. She posted a video by this British woman by the name of Miriam this morning. And she started out saying, I look confident, but inside I'm awful. I'm a wreck. But sometimes you just have to breathe. You have to follow through with that. You have to know you are worth it. And you have to say that to yourself in a mirror and kind of remind yourself that you are worth it, and have that confidence in yourself, because you just being you is enough. I also loved her mannerisms. At one point, she was saying about, it's okay. You're having a good day. I didn't kill anyone today. I didn't murder anyone. I didn't damage anyone. I'm brilliant. That reminder that sometimes we get wrapped up in thinking these horrible things about little tiny events that really don't matter. And it really doesn't matter. You're having a good day. You're brilliant. So I just liked it. It was a very short little vignette out there that I enjoyed thoroughly. And she did it quickly and down and dirty. And it just gave me a much better smile and start to my day.
Yeah, well, it was really encouraging as well for me, and I know for a lot of us. Another encouraging thing I noticed was the pictures that Kara Cruz, Pale Ginger Pear, posted earlier today. It was a progression of her arms. Why don't you tell everybody about this, Kara?
So I'm normally really good at updating monthly surgeries, but I got position switched again at work, and I'm supervising a different team now, and I kind of hate it. I liked my first group much better than this group. So life got away from me, and I realized that last week was 9 months since my arm surgery, which I don't know how that has happened.
Wow.
That's crazy. That also means we are closer to December than we're not, which is also scary. But yeah, so I had posted that there's I can't turn there we go. It's very light compared to what it was. I mean, initially it was raised and all of that and bright red. So my arm incisions are much this one's even down lower. So it's barely visible, but, and there's parts where it's not connected, and it's even lighter in person. And so, I mean, I don't care about scars. If it is always visible, it's always visible. I mean, this one will be tattooed over, but this one, if it's always visible, it's always visible. Because to me, scars, show a journey. They show what you've been on, what you've gone through to get to the point of where you're supposed to be. And so to me, it doesn't bother me, but it's still neat because I assumed, being as pale as I am, that my incisions would be dark and very visible. And so I'm surprised that they're not. I mean, it might be that I avoid the sun and slather myself in sunscreen and lotion, and it probably helps a little bit, but they're very, very, very faint. So.
And you are out there, as April said, living your best life. But someone wants to know, you said it's scary to think about December. Well, and Megan Frew wants to know, why is that scary unless you're thinking about holiday shopping?
I mean, holidays, another year's ending. It's also my birthday, which means I'll be 42. It's just,
I don't know. Some of us think 42 sounds pretty awesome.
I mean, I honestly, I don't mind my age. I guess it's more of a there's stuff I wanted to get done this year that it's not going to be completed because I've only got 3 months now, or, that just that kind of thing. Another year without somebody sharing this with, which like I would rather be single than deal with some of the bullshit that's come my way. But I feel the best I've ever felt, and I want to share this with somebody versus like, well, I'm gonna go watch TV again, or come on, Odie, let's go, let's go do something. I don't know. I guess like my other post that we talked about, like I'm at peace more than I've ever been, and like I'm just truly happy with like how I feel and like how my life is going. I guess I want to redo at the whole marriage thing because I was at my worst during it. Yeah. That like looking back, I mean, I was miserable. I was still eating gluten. I didn't know that I needed to be gluten-free yet. So I was miserable. My mom passed away. Riley had health scares when he was a newborn, and I was just finding out about lymphedema, let alone not even lipedema yet. So like I was literally at my worst. And so now that I've kind of gotten everything sorted out and I feel like I have a chance, I just want to share that with somebody. And by
How many of you on this panel feel confident that very soon we are going to be sharing news of PGP sharing her life? I feel hands up if you feel confident that PGP is going to have her happily ever after, because I'm telling you what, see, everybody's raising their hands all over the place. We are with you.
You guys,
we're not making light of it because your tears move us deeply. And honestly, I walk around my apartment and I'm like, so Brenda, what are we going to do for dinner? Well, Brenda, shall we go to a movie? Brenda, let's go out and say hello to all the puppy dogs in town because you got why do you think I love these roundtables? I get to be with people. I mean, all of you, all the time. I understand. I know what it's like to have a beautiful person to share your life with. And when I get the saddest is when I think I'll never have that again. But why in the world would I have a desire in my heart that would be frustrated? I just don't think our God or our universe or whatever you believe in works that way. I think if you want something, I talk to plenty of people that are like, I don't want anybody. I'm happy. And you know what? Yay. Yay for them. I just want you to know we are so rooting for you. Didn't mean to go off on a tangent, everybody, but I like tangents on occasion, and that one speaks to me. And you just keep glowing and growing, and your destiny is assured. And I say that to everybody. Absolutely. So let's go back to some questions here. Valerie Mills, you always ask questions that are PhD level, and I just hope that I can convey it properly. She says, since the adenoids, tonsils, and the lymphatic system are interconnected components of the body's immune system, are we looking at the correlation with lipedema and lymphedema, and how does that affect those that got COVID?
That is a fantastic question and multi-layered.
Yes.
So thank you. Yeah, you're right. That is PhD high level thinking, and maybe you should join the research team. That might be helpful.
Agreed. Agreed.
So lipedema and lymphedema. So they have some shared characteristics, but they're relatively distinct. But understanding the association of some people who have both or similar symptoms is something that we are doing as part of that larger research survey I mentioned. There are some patients that come in who were previously diagnosed with lymphedema, but when they come and then we're able to do more comprehensive diagnostics, it becomes a little more clear that most likely they have just lipedema. So that's something that's very important to make a distinction of. So I'm glad you asked the question there. And there is a lot of lymph aspects with lipedema, with the edema aspect, the swelling that comes along with it. So understanding that fuller picture is something that we're working on, and something that I think each individual person, so anybody who's listening to this, if you've been diagnosed with either of them, I think it's important to make sure that you're at a place where you're checking all the boxes to see what you have so that you are finding the right treatment and being able to get the right care that you need. So that's a very important question, and I think something that everyone should consider. And with your question about COVID, the COVID aspect of lipedema and lymphedema also is still, we're in the early stages of understanding it. But that does, maybe speaking of tangents, Brenda, I think wants me to tangent to something about our research survey that are numbers about mast cells. So
Yes,
mast cell, which a lot of people are talking about in the comments. So I'm glad that everyone's kind of on the same wavelength here in a good way, and providing the unique ideas about mast cells. So this is based on our patient population, which are lipedema patients at Total Lipedema Care. We see that with our survey, which this survey study, our prospective and retrospective so far, is at about 100 people. And with that, we saw that in our study population, there's about 1.5 in 10 people have been diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome. Now, to put that in context, in the population, it's 1 in 10,000. I see Kathleen understands the scale of a mast cell in the general population. So to repeat the number again, so in the general population, it's 1 in about 10,000. And some numbers say it's even maybe 1 in 20,000. In our study population of about 100, it's 1.5 in 10. So that is just one thing to show that there is potential association. We're still waiting for the study to get larger before we can publish these numbers. But I just wanted to share, because when I was speaking with our research team, these numbers are huge. So, and it does, there's been a lot of research, especially with Dr. Herbst's presentations that she's had at FDRS and her publications that have talked about mast cell. We see that potentially now in the clinical environment, we're seeing a similar trend. And whether that means that mast cell causes lipedema causes mast cell, or that they develop together and exacerbate each other, that part from these numbers we can't say yet. But I think just this understanding might be an opening door for people to think about. And I think a great part of this roundtable, it gets people thinking. And even for me, the reason that I got to pull this number was in preparation of coming here, I wanted to take a look at where our data was standing. So this roundtable today inspired, I think, potentially a whole nother arm of our research now, Total Lipedema Care. So you guys are fantastic just for that. Thank you.
Wow. Well, we're thrilled, and we continue to get inspired every month as well. We do have some questions that have come in, and even Kathleen, you had asked, how do you get diagnosed with mast cell activation?
That's a very good question. So that, because again, not a lot of people, because of its relative lower prevalence in the population, it's harder for having physicians that understand how to diagnose it. So I think it's important to find a specialist, and please send me an email. I'll put my email at the end too. And Eva, who is in the chat too, she's one of our research assistants. She's going to be answering some questions as well in the chat, or filling up gaps that I didn't mention, or links. So please send me an email. Dr. Herbst is fantastic. Dr. Herbst is fantastic at this. So that's one thing I will say. And please find someone who can get you the answers, because I think one of the hardest parts is not having the answers. And a lot of times when you go to the doctor, you're not necessarily going to get the answers that day. It can be a long process, but I think there's hope for being able to understand the way forward. So that's a great question.
So the other question that your assistant answered was about how you can identify Durcums. Did you want to go into that, just because people that are watching the replay? So we have these amazing folks that show up every month on the live, and they have the most fun, we think.
Yeah.
But many other people watch it after. And so it's probably a question that's being considered by people watching the replay. Could you speak to that?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. So Durcums is less prevalent than lipedema. But Durcums, what it is, it's a adipose tissue disorder that basically results in painful lipomas that start developing throughout the body. A lipoma, it can be different sizes, but it feels under the body. And when you palpate, when you feel the outer layer of the body, you can feel these nodules. And these big nodules, lipomas in general are benign. They're not a problem, but in Durcums, they become painful. And one way that it can be, diagnosed, you'd want to go to a physician to really diagnose you. But one thing that makes it characteristically different than lipedema is it may not present in the same way, throughout the body. It may have different spots that it comes up with painful nodules, but when you feel those lumps, they're much larger than a lipedema nodule would be. And what causes Durcum? So again, another great question, and something that there's more to understand, but one thing that we do know is that it is associated with infections. It goes back to the 1800s. There's been research on Durcums, and one aspect of infection being COVID, like I referred to before. COVID can potentially lead, severe case of COVID can lead to Durcums. There's been, a big aspect, Lyme disease. So there's different types of infections that can lead to Durcums, but that's also to be more understood. But overall, the thing to know about Durcums is that it can be more painful and lipedema is very painful, but this aspect, because of the lipomas and their locations, and people can have dozens, up to 50. One of our patients in the COVID case study that we were doing had, just a few lipomas prior to COVID. Afterwards, had more than 55 throughout her body, and they had become painful. So that's a broad, bird's eye view of what Durcums is and kind of some of its similarities and differences to lipedema.
Wow, great explanation. And, we've talked about pain here, and I see people in chat saying Durcums pain is different from lipedema pain. September is the correct name, Patty, Pain Awareness Month?
Yep.
Yeah, and I have also considered, obviously Lympha Press is the sponsor of these monthly roundtables. And the Lympha Press Optimal Plus, the pneumatic compression pump, has been shown to reduce pain. But what's interesting, what I learned in talking to patients was when I thought of pain, I thought of a sharp shooting kind of thing. But there is an ache associated with lipedema. And I see you all nodding your heads. And that is something truly that if we can reduce that feeling of that ache. I know one of Kelly Maynard said that until she had used her Optimal Plus, she didn't even realize the pain she had until it was gone. And then when she didn't use her pump, she felt it come back. So dealing with pain is, I think, an appropriate thing to talk about. And best practices from our medical professionals and also from our panelists who are dealing with this every day. Go ahead, Kara.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much pain I was actually in, and that it wasn't just pain for being fat. That like every doctor my whole life, other than Dr. Jamie, has told me was, well, of course you're going to hurt. You're overweight. Your body's carrying all that weight. You're putting the strain on your body. Why wouldn't you think it hurt? Well, I'm only 45 pounds different, or well, it's more than that now, but like I'm not hundreds of pounds different post-op. I'm still over 300 pounds, and I wake up now with zero pain every day. So you can't tell me that like just because I'm fat, I should be in pain, because I'm not that much smaller now and I have zero daily pain. And I can walk and I can stand, and I was standing for hours last month prepping for my son's birthday, making that grimace cake and everything, and then was up the next day walking and doing stuff, and I wasn't limping. My feet weren't hurting. Like I was up doing stuff for his actual birthday without being like, I'm down for the count because I prepped for it yesterday. But I did not realize until surgeries, like really how truly like pain I was dealing with every single day, because it's a dull ache that you just learn to ignore until it gets so bad one day you can't, and then you're down for a few days, and then you're like, okay, well, I can't put it off any longer. I have to get back to life. So you get back to life through the pain, and you just ignore it until you hit that point again, and then you just repeat. And it really wasn't until literally I woke up from the first surgery and I was like, I feel better coming out of surgery than I did going in, because the pain from the lipedema was instantly gone in like the area we worked on, and it just continued with each surgery. I think that's how and why I kept pushing through for surgeries, because I knew once I got past recovery, like it was so worth it, because I wasn't waking up in that area of pain anymore.
What a great testimony. How gratifying. I mean, Noah, doesn't that make your heart just swell? I mean, that's why you do what you do.
100%. I think when you hear it in the patient's words, it's just, Kara especially, I think it really, it's hard to describe. I guess when people ask me to describe like lipedema pain, not in this environment, everyone here, I think, has a good understanding. But when we talk in other people in the lay environment, it's so hard for me. I struggle to be able to explain the pain because of the way that it's so unique in a way, but also that in the way that it impacts life. And that in some ways is the hardest part. So Kara, thank you for sharing that.
It's a nonstop dull ache that's heavy at the same time.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the best way.
Yeah.
Same for Lympha Press. I mean, when we hear that patients have reduced pain and more mobility, that makes what we do all the more worthwhile. And yet this past month, my friend Patty Cornute had a warning moment with her Lympha Press. And I actually think this is something really good to talk about. We don't weave in too much Lympha Press content because this is not a commercial. But for those of you who do have a Lympha Press or who do want one, what happened to you, Patty?
I mean, anybody who knows when you're doing pumping, it takes time. You got to lay it all out. You got to get inside of it, zip it up, and then you're in there for about an hour. So you get in there, you get, all right, I'm going to read my book. I'm going to do whatever. And maybe 10 minutes in, I hear, psh, and the thing is beeping. And I'm like, what is going on? And it's got like error. And I'm like,
she
I'm taking a
immediately
picture.
texted me.
I'm like, I don't know what to do. This has never happened.
Well,
So
first of all,
I take a picture.
It's never happened before because these are workhorses. It's not like a fussy machine and it doesn't involve any real hard work. It's just the time once you get in it to get the therapy. But I loved that this is one of our super users. Patty has been using her Lympha Press Optimal Plus for over 3 years now. And what do? There's an error message. So
my first one.
Her first one ever. Well, I was not available at the moment. So she's a super sleuth, but so you never have to figure it out yourself. There is an FAQ on our website and you can ask the question, what happens if there's an error message? And the answer populates, and the answer was
to check your hoses. And so I'm all strapped in, and my husband and I both work from home, and this was after my shift, but he was still working. So I'm texting him from the bedroom because I don't want to get out of it. So he comes running in thinking there's something really wrong. And I'm like, there's a warning, there's some hose. And it's literally the connection into the machine just wasn't clicked in all the way. That's all it was.
It's so funny. So yes, and making sure that the plug to electricity is also stable and plugged in there as well. And if that doesn't fix it, there is a number right on your pump that you can call and we will swoop in and help you. But isn't it interesting that there's another hose analogy? We've got hose store. There's a common theme here. I don't know, but there's other questions that we want to deal with as well. Mitzi Love, who has the name I want to have as my stage name. Is it possible to have stage 1 lipedema and it never progress? Good question. What would you say, Kathleen?
Sure. Yes. I think there's a lot of undiagnosed people out there. I think that's the missing link to where we see some of these diagnosis percentage numbers, and then we see the population, what we think is in the population and what is not. I think there's also a lot of undiagnosed primary lymphedema out there that never really progresses. So I think that the lymphatic system is on a continuum. So
good. I think that's very hopeful news. And we do know that we always talk usually at length about all the different modalities, from wearing compression to vibration plates to pumping and all of these different things. It helps to keep it in check. So another great question. What is the difference between a lipoma and a lipedema nodule? Oh, no, you want that one. I could just tell. Because, you always know the medical professionals on the panel, because when you ask something like that, they're like, ooh. So go for it, Noah.
Well, thank you, Brent. Thank you again for a great question. That's, again, what I love about this roundtable. People ask the right questions. There's no wrong question, but these are definitely the right questions. Lipedema nodule. And maybe later on in the panel, I can pull up some pictures too and show them if we have time later. But just to describe now. So the way you'd see it when it's removed from a person is the lipedema nodules can be, this about this size. I don't know if this is helpful, but it can be maybe smaller than like a quarter, sometimes bigger. And these are mainly fibrotic adipose tissue just being, your typical fat, but it becomes fibrotic. And that's basically scarring that can come from the inflammation and other elements of lipedema. When we talk about a lipoma is a sac. So it's a sac that's filled with the lipoma material, which is fat material, but it's inside that sac that can grow over time. And that sac, like I said, most of the time is not painful. It's kind of benign. But in Durcums, like we were talking about, that's when those lipomas can become painful.
The audience is clamoring for your photos. So I am going to give you the ability to share your screen. And Patty, jump on in. What did you want to ask or say?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, so does a lipedema nodule have inflammation within the nodule?
That's a good question. So I guess the nuance there, that's a very good question. So the inflammation is like the factors in the environment of the nodule. And then the nodule itself, when we look at a very molecular level, the interactions of the inflammation would be causing the fibrosis, or one cause of the fibrosis. So the molecular aspect of lipedema, unfortunately, like some other aspects of lipedema, is not fully understood. And fortunately, we're doing some research with people across the country. In Temple University, for example, we send them some lipedema nodules through, our shipping system. We send it over there overnight, actually even faster than overnight, and they get it. And they're doing, they're going to be running comparisons of this fibrotic lipedema nodule compared to what a regular fat nodule looks like at a molecular level. And when you see them, the look is also different in the fact that the lipedema nodule is much more hard. When you squeeze it, you kind of get feedback. It bounces back at you. Whereas in the fat, the normal adipose, it doesn't necessarily do that. It's more smushy. Smushy being the medical term, of course. So
that's a medical term I understand.
But so Patty, so good question. So the inflammation aspect is kind of in that environment and can be causing it to become fibrotic. At a really deep level, we can talk about the fact that basically that hardness comes from the factors in the inflammation processes that basically usually repair things. When you have a wound, for example, you want to be building up some more fibrosis, the scarring, to protect it. In this area, it's kind of going in a negative way, where it's making this scarring in an area that it shouldn't be, in the fat tissue.
Great explanation. And we're going to let you bring up those photos.
Yes,
Great question, Patty. That was amazing. And I saw you nodding a lot, Kathleen. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that explanation or this particular topic?
Do you see a similarity to like the formation of a pearl in an oyster, where it's like the body is laying down scar tissue?
So that's a good point. The material of it, the sheen of it, in many times would be like a pearl, actually, of the lipedema nodules. And again, I've mentioned this many times tonight, is that like each person is different and each scenario of lipedema is different. But in many of the cases, it does kind of have that sheen on it in lipedema nodules.
Wow, very good. Thank you so much. Good. A few questions have still come in, and poor Noah, we still can't, we're just bothering you so much you can't bring up your photos. But this is a question for Kathleen while you're doing that, from Sarah Williams. Sarah, we're so glad you're with us tonight. We appreciate you. If you have lymphedema and manage it until there are no symptoms, have you managed it or are you cured?
See, this is why are they making me get on my soapbox? Because this is my personal soapbox. This is actually the only time I've ever yelled at a surgeon in a conference was over this topic. And I have difficulty with the idea that there's a difference between lipohypertrophy and lipedema, and the only symptom difference is pain. So if you have the presentation of lipedema and everything else about lipedema, but you don't have pain, then all of a sudden, like, you don't have lipedema, you just need to like go off into, and just deal with it yourself. I think in the future, we're going to see there's so many different underlying things that are going on, like just the mast cell, like there's so many different parts of lipedema. I don't think if you draw out one symptom, like it's not painful, then that means that lipedema is cured. I think there's a lot going on that we don't understand yet, and that as we're doing more science, we're going to understand it. But I think there's still something underlying. Can you put lipedema in remission? Hopefully. I mean, I hope that that's what we'll get, more and more treatments, and that's what it'll be. And we're giving an improved quality of life, but I don't think we can like write you off and tell you you don't need any further screening or help from your physician just because, we get your pain level down. I think there's a lot going on inside of the body that we still need to keep our eyes on.
And so can you believe we only have 10 minutes left? This hour zoomed, and it's been so rich with content. And I think it's just a credit to the quality of our audience, the quality of the questions, and the quality of the answers you've given. So thank you, everybody. Is there a possibility that lipedema and lymphedema could be affected by genetically modified foods? And so Angelique, well, don't jump out of your chair. Go for it.
I am so sorry. This one actually hits really, really close to home. You guys know from my journey back ended up twice with Dr. Andrea Brennan. And while I was in her facility, that's where I found out about modified food starches and the modified substances that are on in our foods. And specifically what she brought out that day was something that was in a yogurt. Obviously, one won't say the name of the yogurt now, but that it actually contained probably twice as many calories as what it stated on the label because of having a modified food starch in it. So that one, I've been looking at that a lot, and that's part of why I've been trying to get more into whole foods. And I don't mean that by like something that says organic, but like actually eating real foods, like taking real avocados, real onions, real actual foods from the stores and utilizing them in my diet, because I really do feel like the modified foods are damaging our cells. But I don't have any research on that. We have real researchers here, but I really do feel adamantly on that topic. Sorry.
Well, no, don't be sorry. And we know Susie Boshoff was so adamant about it. She created a gummy and caramels that are wonderful treats that are free from all that junk. So, it's so true that sometimes these challenges cause creativity and solutions to arise. So as we are running out of time here, Noah, did you want to add anything to the previous conversation? Feel free to jump in now, because pretty soon they're going to take the hook and just make us stop here.
They're going to stop us. That's a great question. I think diet is such an important part of this whole situation. When I say diet, I mean making sure we eat the right foods. And now, yeah, Angelica, good. So I don't have any research on this. That, again, another part of the molecular aspect that would be important to understand. But having, finding the right foods that doesn't have all these unnecessary things can play a role in having lower problems with inflammation. So anti-inflammatory diet. And there's a lot of great articles. I do want to shout out, Brenda, the Lympha Press website. You have the fact for the device, but also there's a lot of great articles from Linda Anne Kahn and there's so many fantastic people that write great articles on Lympha Press. So this just reminded me that you guys everyone should check that out, because there's a wealth of information. A lot of times I'm looking up something on Google to find the answer, and guess which website I end up on? Lympha Press. So
I love
just,
that. Oh, that makes my heart happy. In fact, Megan Frew, who's one of our super fans, we love you, Megan. We are with you. She was asking about mast cell activation system, and I know that Linda Anne Kahn had done a webinar on that. Most effective treatments for mast cell?
That's a good question. I'd refer to Linda Anne Kahn for that. She's the expert of that. The link is on the website of Lympha Press, and for the video, I would watch that. And I've had a conversation with Linda Anne Kahn about, connection of mast cell and lipedema and all these other aspects of the disease. And I think being able to treat all aspects of it is really important. So.
And Linda Anne Kahn, we are missing her tonight, but she was just flying back from a conference in Miami. We love that the medical professionals are staying on the cutting edge of research and breakthroughs and making headway, and they're fighting for all of you lipedema patients. So we honor Linda Anne tonight as well, and we miss her. We've got 5 minutes left, and I want to know what you would say to little you. So Jenny, what advice would you give to little Jenny Bo-Jean in, say, kindergarten?
Oh, I don't know if I'm going to go back that far, because when you kind of threw that out at us, I started thinking back to those days. And remember, you may all not have had to do it, but when I was a kid in the 60s, we had to climb a rope, and I could never climb the rope. And that got me thinking on things. And I think what I would say to myself is, don't worry about what you can't do like everybody else. You just be you and do what you can do, and know that you're doing your best at what you do best. So there you go.
And aren't we glad that you do you? Because we wouldn't have it any other way. Thank you, Jenny, for that. I appreciate that. Patty Cornute, what would you say to little you?
Along the same kind of lines as Jenny, but I would think more like, stop trying to make yourself smaller to make the situation around you better. My growing up period was, pretty toxic, and I think I tried to smooth things over for everybody, and I need to take care of me, and I'm okay, and I am first in this scenario. I'm the one who needs to be protected. I'm the kid.
Don't make yourself smaller. I love that. And by the way, I don't know about all of you, but I see these photos and I just want to squeeze and hug and just take all of you home with me. So, Angelique, what would you say to little you?
I would tell her to never give up on herself. Like, you are stuck with you for, at least at this point in my life, I know the next 41 years. So don't give up on you. Don't be afraid to advocate for yourself. Don't be afraid to speak up for yourself. Don't be afraid to go for all of the things that you want for yourself. But more importantly, don't be afraid to change for you. Don't be so caught up in what you think is right or what you think the norm or the trend is, that you're afraid to change that. If you have to change your diet, your routines, your friend circle, your location, whatever it is, do what you need to do for you.
Oh, the best advice I was ever given was when someone said, just because you've been doing something for so long doesn't mean you should keep going. You've invested time, but you're only investing more time if it's not the right thing. So well said, Angelique. I love that. So before I go to UPGP, because I have a feeling you're going to have a drop the mic moment for us, Noah, would you be willing to jump in and tell us what you would say to little you?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm actually still my extended part of schooling, so I tell myself this right now too. But going back to even earlier, Noah, I think remaining curious about things that you might not initially have known about, I think is essential. So to give a quick tangent, when I met Dr. Schwartz, I had not heard about lipedema before meeting Dr. Schwartz. Then I talked to him, and then I learned all about the process, how it works, and who it affects, how it affects everyone. Then I realized that this is such an important thing, and then that kept opening different doors to further exploration. And then I realized that because I wanted to keep learning and staying curious about something that, again, I didn't know initially, it led to, during my Master of Public Health, my whole capstone became about lipedema. And then now in medical school, I'm trying to make sure everybody knows in my class, so the next generation of doctors will know what lipedema is and know how important it is. So staying curious, I think, can lead to a lot of
staying curious. Oh, I love that. And come on, Kathleen, we want to hear from you.
Yes, and I think you know what I'm going to say. If I was going to talk to the little girl that I would say this was about the time that my mother was diagnosed with breast cancer, and we had to eventually see her pass away when I was 20. And I would say to that little girl, the tragedy and all the suffering that you're seeing now, you're going to turn it into a triumph and being able to help other people with cancer. And your hands are too tiny right now to help your mother when she has cancer, but you're going to grow up and be able to help so many people when you're an adult.
And that is the alchemy of pain. Thank you for sharing that. I just know that your mother is so proud and so many people have benefited. Thank you.
Yeah.
So Kara?
I don't think you've ever called me Kara. So mine's kind of like a two-part thing, because these are the two that keep coming into my head since we've talked about it. One is, don't doll yourself. As I look back at pictures, elementary school, I wore all the bright, crazy colors, all the crazy prints. The one picture I'd sent you guys, that one we share, has a polka dot cat on it. Another picture was neon cats. I don't know what the cat theme was, but there was bright outfits. And then I hit middle school and high school, and my wardrobe was like neutral, gray, brown, dull, like trying anything to look smaller, look tinier, look invisible, because every single adult in my life pointed out that I was fat and that something was wrong. So to go along with that, adults aren't always right, including doctors. Because especially in the 80s, we were taught that like doctors were these amazing, like smarter than the rest of us people, that like what they said went, like that was it. You just listened and you did what they said. But they never had an answer for me. They never had a solution. It was lose weight. I don't believe that you're not eating. I don't believe that you're active. I don't believe you. You're lying. You're wrong. It was to the point that like you just start to believe, because you're raised that the adults in your life know best and they're right, but they're not. And it's just
powerful. If we had a crystal ball, but we do learn. And I will close and say, when I look at my photo, I think I would tell that little girl, don't be afraid to have feelings. I so didn't want anybody to be upset, so I never cried. And so what happens is later on in life happens and you want to cry and you can't find the tears, or you think tears are wrong. I remember saying to Kathleen ages ago, what about tears? And tears heal you. Tears are a healing balm, and it's not a failure or a weakness. Actually, it's in learning to cry that I've found strength. I hope you all feel especially seen and heard and loved tonight. I know I do. This panel is invigorating. It's full of life and inspiration and love and information. And we especially thank you, Noah and Kathleen, for joining us this evening. Thank you, every one of you. I see your names, Heba and Holly and Jeannie and Janice and Laurie and Linda and Oh my goodness, Casey, and we just appreciate you. You make this work. Thank you, Lympha Press, for giving us this hour every month. And thank you to our regular anchor panelists. You bring your unique magic every month. Much love and appreciation, everybody. Have a great night. See ya.